Good afternoon or good morning, depending where you are. Sorry for that late start there. We had some technical difficulties, but my name is Eric Prado, and I will be your host for today's event, Around the World with Envoy, Europe Edition, presented by Envoy Global. In today's session, we'll take you around the world and discuss various immigration policies in a handful of European countries. But first, there are a few housekeeping items. This session is being recorded, and we will send you the recording after the presentation concludes. The presentation will last for about 40 minutes, and we will have ample time left for question and answer throughout the presentation. And if you do want to ask a question, please use the question function on the right-hand side of the webinar screen. For those unfamiliar with Envoy, for nearly 20 years, we have been on a mission to fix the frustrating and confusing immigration process. We combine expert legal representation with innovative technology to deliver the only platform that makes it seamless for companies to hire, mobilize, and manage a global workforce. We secure work authorization in 150 plus countries. We've grown 30% year over year, and we work with over 1,000 customers. We are particularly proud of our NPS score, which is a testament to the employee experience we provide. All right, now I would like to introduce our presenters today, Karima Hernandez and Zuri McCarter. Karima is one of Envoy's global immigration case specialists. She has extensive immigration experience as a paralegal and as a case manager at Harris Immigration Law, among other firms throughout her career. She has helped Envoy Global execute visa and work permit cases to 50 plus global destinations. How are you doing this afternoon, Karima?
I'm doing well, Larry. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
And also joining us today is Zuri. Zuri is one of Envoy's global immigration specialists. She has extensive experience as an immigration paralegal at Fragomen Del Rey and Vedder Price before joining Envoy Global. Zuri has almost 10 years of experience working in employment-based immigration, both U.S. inbound and global casework. In terms of the agenda, Karima and Zuri will provide country overviews for the UK, Germany, Ireland, the Netherlands, and France. And again, following the presentation will be a question and answer session. And with that, I will turn it over to our presenters.
Thanks so much, Eric. So we'll just start with the Europe at a glance. The European Union consists of 28 member states and is one of the largest trade groups in the world. So there are also immigration benefits for the citizens of the member states of the EU, essentially. While certain nationalities, including U.S. citizens, are visa exempt for business and tourist activities, all travelers outside of the EU member states must adhere to the 90 out of 180-day rule. So what that means is that an applicant can stay in the Schengen region for 90 days in a 180-day period, and they can travel freely throughout the Schengen zone for a maximum of that stay. So there are certain common immigration rules valid across the EU, while other aspects are determined by each EU country. So that means that the immigration rules are not identical in different EU countries. They do have vast similarities, but most applications require similar documents, but again, they have their own specific requirements within the EU. So most of the applications require a residence permit for the applicant to stay in that country. And then while the work permit is actually secured as well, that only grants the applicants for work authorization. So we'll highlight all of these momentarily for the countries that we referenced. And moving on to the next slide.
Great, thanks, Karima. I'll lightly touch on Schengen visas. That is something that we will also cover momentarily based upon country. But please note that Ireland and the UK are not Schengen member states, and Schengen business visas do not apply to these jurisdictions. A Schengen business visa is required for any nationality that is not visa exempt and that is visiting for business purposes. Generally, permissible business activities include attending business meetings, conferences, and receiving training. Some of the challenges that we face with this visa category are appointment availability, processing time, validity, and in-person appointments. Appointment availability can be difficult to secure, especially during the summer months. Therefore, we advise on initiating Schengen business visas at least 3 months in advance of the travel date. The processing time is another challenge that we face. Generally speaking, processing times are about 14 days. But few German jurisdictions do have processing times of about 2 days. Again, this is more of the exception and not necessarily the rule. So be advised that this is, again, in very few instances. Visa validity can also be an issue. It is issued at the discretion of the consulate and oftentimes is issued as a single entry visa. Applicants must also file within their jurisdiction, which is dictated by their residential address. Attending in-person appointments is also generally required with, again, a few very narrow exceptions. This means that an employee may need to travel domestically to attend his or her visa appointment.
Perfect. Thanks, Barry. So circling back to the EU Blue Card, the EU Blue Card is an EU-wide work permit, which is essentially a special work authorization for local employment. Again, that's for applicants that are traveling to be on local payroll in their country or where they will reside. Each country has their own minimum salary requirements specific to that country that's going to authorize their work. And each country also has their own educational requirements. So while each country has that EU Blue Card, their requirements vary drastically. So this is typically a common misconception. We've had instances where employees have secured an EU Blue Card, for example, in Poland, and then would like to work in the Netherlands, and ultimately it will need to be determined on a case-by-case basis. But most countries require their own work permit applications for the Blue Card, given that they have their own specific requirements. So only in certain instances can the EU Blue Card be applied to another country, but will require, again, their own application. So again, it really needs to be determined on a case-by-case basis, whether council determines if that can be applied to their new work permit.
Great, thanks, Karima. Now we will go over a high-level UK overview. Within this category, I will speak to the sponsor license and also the most common work type, which is a Tier 2 visa. Please be advised that on this webinar, we will not be speaking on Brexit. We will hold a separate webinar in the fall to address this topic. So the UK operates on a point-based system and requires that UK entities hold a sponsor license for the most common work type. As mentioned, the sponsor license is required for UK entities to hire foreign nationals. The sponsor license generally holds a validity of up to 4 years and is renewable. For UK entities that do not hold a valid sponsor license, the processing time to secure one is about 6 to 18 weeks. So it does vary greatly based upon how quickly we can gather documents, the processing time that the Home Office takes to adjudicate the case, and this is really where we see the greatest variance in terms of the processing time for the sponsor license. So now I will discuss the two most common work categories within the UK, and those include a Tier 2 General and a Tier 2 Intracompany Transferee. So a Tier 2 General is ideal for candidates that wish to remain in the UK indefinitely or have not previously been employed by an affiliated entity. This visa option does provide a pathway to permanent residency, otherwise known as indefinite leave to remain. Under this category, a compliant resident labor market test is required, and it must be carried out for a minimum of 28 days, unless the employee is a high earner with a wage that is greater than 159,600 British pounds. Further, a Tier 2 General visa can generally be granted for up to 5 years and extended for 1 further year for a total of 6 years. Indefinite leave to remain, permanent residency, can be sought after 5 years of continuous residence in the UK. The salary threshold for this visa type does need to be met, and this will vary based upon the job category. Clients should allow at least 1 to 2 months of processing time under this visa category. The next option is a Tier 2 Intracompany Transferee, and this category is for qualified foreign nationals that are assigned to work for a UK branch of their overseas employer. They must have worked for the company for at least 12 months prior to initiating their assignment work permit in the UK. In certain instances, if he or she is a high earner, the 12-month requirement isn't necessarily required. So it is important to note that under this category, it does not lead to permanent residency, so it is solely meant to be temporary. The maximum time that the visa can be issued is for 5 years, and it does require a 12-month cool-off period after this time period. A salary threshold also must be met for this visa type, which will depend on the on the job category. Clients should allow at least 1 month of processing time for this visa type. A fun fact about this visa category is that if an employee is a high earner, she or he may be eligible for an ICT extension of up to 9 years. The salary threshold to be deemed a high earner does change. It is generally updated on an annual basis. Currently, it's at 120,000 British pounds. But again, this is a workaround if you have an employee that was initially placed into this category and truly didn't have long-term intent. Should that need change at some point down the road, there is a slight workaround, but again, overall, it does not lead to permanent residency.
Thanks, Sari. Moving on to the next slide for Germany. So I'll just discuss the viable work permit options for Germany as well as any non-work permit options. So non-EEA citizens need a work permit for Germany, and most of these work permits require a labor market check with the labor agency. But there are employment notifications options that can be an alternative to applying for a full-blown work permit for qualifying applicants, such as executing activities under a contract. That can be an example. This is an option to significantly reduce processing times for employers who just want their employees on the ground as soon as possible, dependent on their eligibility requirements. If the work permit is ultimately required, the labor agency will need to certify that there is a need for that foreign employer to complete that position. There are minimum salary requirements for each of these positions, and that it qualifies under the ordinance that the on employment for foreign nationals. So the more common visa types for Germany, again, the EU Blue Card, as we mentioned, this is a type of work permit only exclusively for Germany, the EU Blue Card for Germany. After about 18 months, the holder of that blue card can enter other EU member states to apply for that country's blue card, but again, there are some preconditions that need to be met. Fortunately for this work permit application, it doesn't require approval from the labor market as a pre-audit inquiry, which I'll highlight later on, but it is a more fast-track work permit option for specialized employees. Another option is the intra-corporate transfer, the ICT option, similar to other EU countries. This is a fairly new work permit option that is very similar to the residence permit for employment purposes that's listed right below it. These two work permit options are pretty similar because they both require approval from the employment agency in Germany, which includes a pre-audit inquiry process. This essentially documents from both the employer and the employee to be filed at the labor market for a pre-audit approval. Once you receive that approval, the employee needs to secure their national visa for entry in their jurisdiction of where they reside. There are differences between the two. The ICT will require additional documents, to portray that the applicant is eligible for the ICT option. But it is sometimes opted for over the residence permit for employment purposes because it allows the applicant's spouse to enter Germany without having to provide knowledge of German language, which is kind of a hidden requirement for some of the work permit options for Germany. This isn't exclusively required for the residence permit for employment purposes, but it is determined on a case-by-case basis whether or not they can be eligible to skip that step in the process. So major immigration authorities include the Aliens Office, so that's also known as the Foreigners Office, and that's essentially where the employees submit their residence permit applications and any registrations, and the Federal Labor Agency as well. So this agency processes the work permit applications for most of the work permits for Germany. Another common work permit option is the settlement permit for highly skilled specialists. Usually this is for special technical knowledge and employees who qualify under that work permit route. And business visitors can travel to Germany either visa exempt, such as U.S. nationals, or again with the Schengen visa, as Zuri highlighted earlier in the slide.
Great, thank you, Karima. So next we'll move over to a high-level overview of the Ireland and the work process there. So Ireland is indeed becoming a more popular jurisdiction for our clients and in general. We find that the need here is greatly increasing. As the jurisdiction gains popularity, our partner advises entities to explore the possibility of registering as a trusted partner with the Irish authorities. This is secured before the IDA in Ireland, which is an agency that is responsible for the attraction and inward foreign direct investment into Ireland. It is open to companies that are either like in expansion mode, startup companies, as well as regular users of the employment permits regime. The trusted partner status will essentially streamline the application process for the employer. And the purpose of this is to ease the administrative burden on the employers and to remove requirements that replicate the same information with respect to each employment permit application filing. There are a number of benefits with the Trusted Partner Initiative, and those include a validity period of 2 years. The actual application itself is adjudicated in about 2 to 5 business days. There is no filing fee. The employment permit application forms are generally shortened, and there is reduced paperwork for every employment permit that is sought under this category. Overall, it also has quicker processing times, which is always advantageous. So next, I'll move over to discuss a few of the most common work permit options in Ireland. I'll start off with the critical skills employment permit. And this permit is designed to attract highly skilled individuals into the Irish labor market with the aim of encouraging them to take up permanent residence in Ireland. Eligible occupations under this type of permit are deemed to be critically important to growing Ireland's economy. The roles are highly demanded and highly skilled and in significant shortage within the labor market. Occupations such as ICT professionals, professional engineers, and technologists are catered for under this category. Specifically under this category, a market labor test is not required. Under this category, there are 2 subcategories, being a Tier 1 and a Tier 2. The Tier 1 is for, it caters to highly paid and skilled sectors of the industry where the annual salary is in excess of 60,000 euros. Where that salary requirement is not met, there is a Tier 2 option, and this is for salaries between 30,000 euros and 59,999. Salaries within that threshold are generally placed under the Tier 2 category. And these roles must fall under the highly skilled eligible occupation list. This visa type carries a 2-year validity period. The next common visa type is a general employment permit. This subcategory is for foreign nationals that hold job offers in Ireland in any occupation except those deemed to be ineligible under the employment permits list. They must have an annual salary of at least 30,000 euros, and they must also possess relevant skills and experience to perform the role. A labor market test is generally required. However, if a recommendation letter is secured by the IDA, the labor market test is not required. So it's always beneficial to have a contact within the IDA agency in Ireland. This visa type is valid for 2 years and is renewable for up to 5 years. Another common visa category in Ireland is the intra-company transfer permit. This subcategory is for foreign nationals that are assigned to work for an Irish branch of their current employer. The employees must be senior managers or key personnel earning at least 40,000 euros. Trainees may also fit under this category, and they must earn at least 30,000 euros. They must have worked for the company for at least 6 months prior for senior management and key personnel, and at least 1 month for trainees. The duration for this work type is 2 years, and it can be renewed for 3. A short-term work option in Ireland is the atypical working scheme. This permit is for foreign nationals on short-term assignments in either specialized industries that are being used to fill a skills shortage gap or to conduct research. In the past, we've also secured an atypical working scheme for interns. The duration for this visa type is 3 months or less. However, family cannot accompany. That is, dependent visas under this under this category are not an option. The final work category that I'm going to discuss is the Van der Elst visa. This visa is for non-EEA nationals who are paid and employed in another EU state and can work in Ireland for a limited period without applying for an employment permit. To qualify, the foreign nationals must be legally residing and working in another EU state, and they must visit Ireland to provide services on behalf of their employer. So again, a nice tip in Ireland is that in certain instances, securing an IDA letter of support for any filing can be beneficial to the filing. Again, having a contact with the IDA is always a plus. Currently in Ireland, we are experiencing delays in terms of the processing times for employment applications, so that's something to be mindful of. Furthermore, certain visa types require that, certain visa categories, require that employees secure an Irish residence permit once the applicants are in country. Currently, there is also a backlog in securing these appointments. Like many government agencies, the Irish Immigration Agency is currently understaffed. And while they do their best using these resources that they have, there are significant delays in securing these permits in Dublin at the moment. This is currently worsened by staff holidays, and we expect that this will persist throughout September, October, and November. Also, as we approach the fall, students will be arriving in Dublin looking to register. So again, this is going to further increase the appointment availability as it relates to the Irish residency permit.
Great, thanks, Mary. Moving on to the next slide for the Netherlands. We've also seen a significant increase in the need to send employees in the Netherlands due to their thriving international business community. If a non-EU national wants to work in the Netherlands, there are a few options similar to other EU countries that are based upon similar qualifications such as position, salary, education, and local contract, or whether that employee is going to be on assignment. Similar to other EU countries, nationals of EU and EEA countries and Switzerland don't require work permits to live and reside in the Netherlands. However, they do need to register locally if they plan to stay in the Netherlands beyond a certain time frame. So they must register within a certain time frame with the appropriate offices. Moving on to the next slide, some major immigration authorities are the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Immigration and Naturalization Service, also known as the IND in Amsterdam, and the Employment Insurance Agency. So these are the authorities that process most of the work permit applications. A few of the more common visa types for the Netherlands include the highly skilled migrant permit. This requires the company actually to be registered in the Netherlands with the IND as a recognized sponsor, and the position must meet wage criteria as well. So the applicant can actually secure a visa up to 5 years. However, it is dependent on the length of the employment contract. So it's important for employers to determine whether or not they'll need the employee there for a longer period of time, or if they'll just need them temporarily. So the good thing about this visa type actually is that it includes work permit authorization and residence permit authorization. So it doesn't require the employee to submit 2 separate applications. So it is a more streamlined process. Similar to the other EU countries, the EU Blue Card is a viable visa option for an employee that's going to be on local contract in the Netherlands. Again, there are strict conditions for this, similar to the other countries, as it does have an academic requirement which includes a 3-year bachelor's degree or higher and other qualifying requirements. The ICT option, again, is another viable visa option for the Netherlands, and the temporary stay visa is another more short-term visa option. So this is an entry-only visa that's validated for 3 months, and the visa holder must enter the Netherlands before the visa expires. So it's for more of a short-term assignment work permit, and it allows for, again, foreign nationals who wish to live in the Netherlands for more than 3 months would qualify for this option. Some things to note are a lot of the work permits actually require apostille documents for their own educational documents and their relationship certificates. And apostille is essentially just a certification of that document to prove its authenticity to the government. And sometimes these take some time to secure, which may delay the work and residence permit processes. But we have been actually informed that around in February in the Netherlands, this new regulation will eliminate mandatory apostille documents for EU nationals, but more information is to come once we get closer to that date, and we'll provide possibly a release for that. Another interesting fact is that work permits or certain work permits actually allow the applicant to enter the Netherlands while their work permit application is being under process. So we sometimes see that applicants want to enter fairly quickly to, find housing, et cetera, and maybe not start work immediately, but at least get those items off of their checklist before they start working. So the good thing about some Netherlands work permits is that it does allow the employee to enter while that work permit is in process. So while they don't have work authorization until it's approved, they can enter Netherlands and secure those items to get established in the Netherlands.
Great, thanks, Karima. And last but certainly not least is France. We'll go over a quick high-level overview of France and the permissible work options for France. So with France, this jurisdiction tends to be more complex. It is certainly on the more expensive end in terms of securing work authorization. Furthermore, we have found that recently visa appointment wait times in the United States have increased. This is due to VFS becoming the new third-party visa service provider for France, and this change occurred recently in July of 2018 across all jurisdictions in the United States. Also, French entity sponsors are required for all French assignments. For many of the visa categories, we must also provide the wage of a local French worker that has the same experience and is in the same role. So that's something to be mindful of with France.
Thanks, Ari. So we'll cover just some of the key visa options for France, starting with the EU Blue Card. Again, similar to the other countries, the status is for highly skilled nationals with job offers in France. This status allows the family actually of the employee to benefit from this favorable status. So they'll be able to enter and stay in France and pass through other Schengen member states for a maximum of that 90-day within a 180-day period. So it's essentially works as a Schengen visa for family members. Some qualifications to secure this EU Blue Card are having at least a 3-year university degree or at least 5 years of relevant professional experience. And the visa can be secured for up to 4 years, and it is renewable. So it is a more specialized work permit option in France as well. The local hire option is actually a status for nationals with employment contracts in France for longer than 12 months. This status typically requires a labor market test, and the positions must be listed in the shortage occupation list. Again, this is a status for third country nationals with the employment contract, and this visa is valid for 1 year and it is renewable. So it is a more short-term option as well.
Great. And I'll quickly discuss the intracorporate transfer options. So within the intra-corporate transfers, there are two subcategories. Minimum salary requirements must be met for each. And again, this is based upon the role in France and what category that fits under. Previous employment experience with an affiliate entity is also required for the intra-corporate transfer permit. Generally, this is about 3 months of prior experience with a related entity. Significant experience or education in the field of employment will also be a requirement for both subcategories within the ICT field. So for the passport talent, this category requires a French employment contract. The duration can be anywhere from 3 months up to 4 years. For the salary détaché, for this category, the employee must remain on foreign payroll. This is generally reserved for senior management or employees that hold specific expertise or knowledge. A short-term work option for France is available to third country nationals that go to France as intra-company transfers for 90 days or less. Payroll may either remain abroad or locally in France. This visa category also carries minimum salary requirements, and significant experience or education in the field of employment will be required for the short-term work option. Another option is a foreign service provider, and this status is for third country nationals that are employed by overseas companies that go to France to provide a temporary service. The employees must remain on foreign payroll, but must also earn a minimum wage compliant with French labor regulations. They must also be assigned to a French entity in the framework of a service agreement with the overseas company. Further, they must also remain employed by the home country. This visa type has a duration of up to 1 year and is renewable. The final category is the business visitor category. Certain nationalities may travel as tourists or business visitors under visa waiver. For those categories, or for those nationalities that are not eligible, a Schengen visa would be required. Again, we reiterate that we have seen an increased delay in available appointments for visas. So that's something to be mindful of when sending employees to France.
All right. Well, Karima and Zuri, thank you so much for the great presentation. As mentioned at the start of the webinar, we do have a few minutes for a question and answer session. And a reminder before we get to that, a recording will be sent out, and the slides both of them will be sent out to everyone who has attended today. So keep an eye out on your inbox for that message. And again, if you want to ask a question to Karima or Zuri, please do so using the GoToWebinar panel on the right-hand side of your screen. And we already have some questions coming in. All right, so Zuri, let's start off with this question for you. If I have an employee who has an EU blue card in a country, can they work elsewhere?
Sure, thank you for the question. As Karima touched upon lightly for the visa categories, this must be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. It could vary by country. For example, it is possible that someone with an EU blue card in Spain may not be eligible for an EU blue card in the Netherlands due to differing EU blue card requirements. So with these types of questions, we generally conduct an assessment, again, just to confirm on a case-by-case basis if certain requirements have been met and what that would look like.
All right. Let's see, next one, Karima. Are appointments required for Schengen visa appointments?
Sure, yeah, that's a really good question that we sometimes get, just especially given when applicants have previously secured Schengen visas. So depending on the consulate and on, again, a case-by-case basis, some applicants can waive that appointment scheduling if they've previously, secured Schengen visas. Again, it depends on the country where they'll be traveling to. But most of the time, most consulates, such as Spain, require an appointment to submit your biometrics pretty much every time you submit an application. So it really, again, depends on the consulate, but most of the time it is required. But again, we'll need to determine it by the consulate and there are requirements that the applicant needs to submit their biometrics, and that's essentially why they need to submit their or schedule the appointment. But yeah, good question.
Gotcha.
And I just want to add, it is important to note that, you know, a French consulate in Chicago may have different requirements than a French consulate in, say, Los Angeles. We do see that from time to time. So they don't all operate in the same fashion.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's see. Scrolling through here. Zuri, I think this is a good one for you to tackle. I need a Schengen visa, and I am traveling to 2+ countries. Where do I apply?
That's a great question, and we actually find that clients are oftentimes in this situation where they may be traveling to 2 different Schengen countries. For example, if they're traveling to France and to Germany. Generally, we advise on applying at the consulate for the country that will serve as the main destination, meaning the country that will serve as the longest duration of stay. So if an employee is going to Germany for a week and they're going to France for 2 days, the country of main destination would be Germany because they're going to stay there for the longest period of time. If an employee will stay in 2 countries for an equal amount of time, then the country that will serve as the initial entry point should be the consulate where they apply.
Okay, gotcha. Let's see. And this one I'll leave it open for both of you, whoever wants to tackle it. If I don't have any employer from the countries that you two talked about, how can I contact those employers who can file my card?
So that's a good question actually, because sometimes we've had that question where employees want to travel to EU countries to work remotely or anything like that. So it'll really, again, determine on the country where you want to work in. Sometimes certain countries have PEO options, and otherwise you would most of the time require a sponsor for your application. So again, it would depend on the circumstances, whether your home country employer is sending you over there, if you're working remotely, if you're going to be working at a client side or entity. So we always suggest just to submit an assessment to our team, just so we can have counsel review all of the viable visa options for you, and really weigh in on certain circumstances for you, just because it is pretty nuanced and dependent on who's going to be your employer in that country.
Gotcha.
Right, and you know, certain countries do have visa types that are solely meant for, you know, maybe opening a new office. I know the UK, for example, has that as an option. So again, to Karima's point, we would just need an assessment for the employee in order to determine the visa options that, again, would vary greatly based upon the country in question.
Okay. In the UK, is it mandatory to make sure that an employee register and bring all documents at the office the first day? So I guess it looks like there's a multiple part question, so we'll tackle that part and then move on to the rest of the question, if that works.
Sure. In the UK.
Go ahead, Zuri.
I was just going to say, in the UK, no, it's fine. In the UK, there are the right to work checks that an employer must conduct, and our partner will outline those. You know, from a Tier 2 perspective, our partner does prepare an audit pack, meaning if the home office were to visit, that audit pack would be in place for the employer to ensure that all of the requirements you know, are met. For those that are very familiar with the U.S. immigration space, it would be similar to, say, like a public access file. So something along those lines, just to ensure that the appropriate documents are being held with the UK employer. And again, the right to work check is something that our UK employer would go over prior to an employee starting at the UK office.
Okay, gotcha. And then the other part would be, is there another country where it is mandatory to have the is there another country where it's mandatory to have the same UK registration?
So it would depend, same UK registration.
Or,
I think,
Well,
for each, oh, sorry, go ahead, Zuri.
no, I was just going to say the Netherlands has somewhat of a similar requirement, and that's called the recognized sponsor status. That makes employees eligible for certain visa types. If they don't hold that status, there are longer processing times, and the visa options are a bit more limited. It just really depends, you know, on what the purpose is for the employee to be working in there. Is it an intercompany transfer? Is it a new hire, et cetera? So based upon those details combined with the need for the recognized sponsor status, that's the only other country that I could think of off the top of my head that has a similar requirement. It's not the exact requirement because you can still hire or rather sponsor an employee without that status. It just may be that the processing time is a lot longer. So again, based upon the need, it would really just depend.
gotcha. All right, let's give it a couple more seconds. I think that's it. Okay, well, that's all the time we have for questions. And before we sign off today, I want to give a special thanks to Karima and Zuri for joining us on this great presentation. And there were also some few specific questions, and while we ran out of time to discuss those today, we'll be sure to pass those along and reach out to you shortly. And again, a recording and the slide deck will be sent out to every attendee, so be sure to keep an eye out on your inbox for that email. Again, thank you so much for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.